Hi, boys and girls. It's time for chapter 22 of the Wise Enchanter. Very carefully, they picked their way along the pathway, choosing each step with caution. Soon it seemed that they were walking along with nothing more than a rocky ledge that fell away into the steep gorge made by the river. The chill air around them became heavy. They had to push against it in order to move forward. And the distance between the ledge and the swirling waters seemed greater and greater by the moment. The grass rustled. A strange wind blew. Rukmini stopped, her ears tuned to the sounds. They all waited and watched. "What is it?" Lauren whispered. "I don't know," Rukmini replied. "I feel something. We must hurry up." They began to walk again. Afternoon wore on, and the sun came out from behind clouds that did little to warm the children. The underlings, tucked safely away, were protected from the cold, as was the dormouse, who was fast asleep and knew nothing of the cold or the underlings. At last the rocky ledge came to an end, and they found themselves walking on rich green grass. They could still hear the river and continued on, following its sound. As they looked at the grass, they noticed how the edges were turning brown, as if each blade had been touched by a frost overnight and was losing its life and color. Far away through the clouds and mists and over many waves of blue and green and silver, in a room at the top of the castle with spires that reached up into the heavens, Gadrin knelt at her father's bedside. It was late afternoon and already dark as if it were night. Icicles clung to the castle walls and hung down from the tall spires. Tears rolled down Gadrin's beautiful cheeks as she took her father's hand. "It won't be long now, dear father. They will be here. I can feel them getting nearer. Surely you know that." "Ah, yes, my child, but they may be too late. For me, they may be too late. The light has become so weak that I can scarcely move my head. Words have been vanishing from the world so quickly, and with them go all thoughts, all wisdom. I fear it is the loss that weakens me. The darkness grows stronger. Urkel's appetite is immense. He is rising from the deep, and soon he will devour everything, and even I will be too weak to resist him, too weak to make my journey to the everlasting islands." Gadrin looked at her father. "Father, I will not let that happen. The children will arrive here safely with their magic book, in which they are carefully keeping every symbol that they find. When you have this before your eyes, your strength will return." "Tell me," he said softly, "do you believe that after all their adventures, they are still unselfish and kind?" "I believe they are. If they are not, they will never be able to conquer what lies ahead of them. I believe that their hearts are true and that no selfish thoughts have entered their minds, nor unkind words come from their lips." Gadrin pressed her father's cool hand between her two warm ones. He looked at her and tried to smile. Then he sighed and let his head fall back against the soft pillow. The waves crashed over Gadrin's feet. She called over the wind, uttering a strange sound that traveled over and under the water, far and fast as any echo. After a while, bubbles rose in the water in front of her, and the sea sprite emerged sparkling from the deep. "You called, Your Majesty? Thank you for coming. I may not travel as a dolphin, and yet I fear greatly for our 4 young friends. Look, the clouds are dark, the cold has set in. People's thoughts are murky and grim. Now Urkel knows that the children have many stories, and I fear that he will try to do great harm. This cannot happen. Is there anything you can do? I will keep watch over them, Your Majesty. They have gone far from the sea and lost their boat, and I've been waiting for them to return to the water. While I cannot fight off a beast such as Urkel, I can guide our friends unseen. I can do a few things to make it easier for them and warn them if danger approaches. Thank you, Gadrin said. That's all I ask. Her lovely face was as pale as the ice that clung to the castle. The sea sprite bowed her head and then splashed back into the water and swam swiftly away. Now we're going back to the children. We're starting to go downhill. I can feel it. It's definitely steeper and colder. Look, the river's getting narrower. There's a valley below. Lots of valleys. The children talked rapidly. They were cold now, and the sun did little to warm them. The underlings, who had been on Michael's arm, now rode along on his shoulder and whispered in his ear. I do know this place, she said. This must be the land of 1,000 valleys. We used to come here when she stopped talking. Michael couldn't see why she was suddenly quiet, but then he thought he heard her choking or coughing or sobbing. Does anyone know if this leads to the sea? Michael asked. The sea, chanted the underling on his shoulder. The path led them down and down and down. Down they went from one level to the next. Each time they descended, the river became smaller. Less water cascaded down over the rocks. Maybe the river goes underground, Sifo said, and then we won't know if it goes to the sea. But hardly had the words escaped his lips when a gust of salty, cold air blew into their faces. The children stopped where they were. They turned to look back on the way that they'd come. Sifo was tired and sat down at the edge of the river. He had been carrying the magic book, which seemed to be suddenly filled with lead. He felt he just had the weight of the world on his shoulders, and he let the bag with the magic book fall to the ground. As he gazed at the valleys through which they had come, the sun appeared from the clouds to shine on the sharp inclines. The light illuminated a valley shape, and at the same time the other children saw what Sifo did. There's a letter in the land, he said. The valley is a V. He was almost too weak to lift the magic book. Rukmini rushed over to help him lift it onto his lap. They all looked at the big deep V of the valley through which they had just descended. The sides were steep, and it seemed impossible that they had come all the way down there without falling hundreds of feet down into the river. The moment Sifo's drawing was complete, the sun vanished again, but the page shone for a few moments after the light had gone. Sifo closed the magic book. The dormouse stirred in his bag and tried to make himself more comfortable. Then he suddenly poked his head through the opening. What is it? He asked, sniffing the air. The letter V, Sifo replied. No, what's the smell? Oh, you've smelled them at last, the underlings, Lauren said. Allow me to introduce you. Some little pale faces appeared rather cautiously from everywhere and looked curiously at the perplexed dormouse. Nope, he said slowly, eyeing the underlings. That's not what I smell. Ooh, I wonder what he smells. Okay, here's the picture of the valley. Can you clearly see the V? I hope so. See the V? Now on to chapter 23.